Thank you so much for joining me at this webinar today. I am assuming that a lot of the people who are here today are from Australia, New Zealand, or the United Kingdom, as that's the area that I tend to direct my work focus. But if you are from anywhere else in the world and you have found us, then you are most welcome to be joining with us for this webinar. So I'm recording this webinar from my home in Sydney, Australia. So before we get going, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to Aboriginal people, past, present, and those emerging. And especially to any Aboriginal people who may be joining us or any other Native people who may be joining us on the webinar today. Okay, so just so you know, this webinar is a pre-recorded webinar, so there is no opportunity for question and answers at this time. But if you have any questions or you want to follow up with anything, then please make sure that you reach out to me on any of the communication methods that are down on the bottom of the screen at the moment. So let's get started. What I'd like to do is to tell you a little bit about me so that you know who it is that you're listening to and what it is that I have to share and why I'm qualified to share with you. So I am a UK educated and qualified social worker. I did my first degree in social policy and politics at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK, and my master's of social work at the Queen's University of Belfast. So I trained as a social worker in the late 1990s in Northern Ireland, which, if any of you know anything about Northern Ireland, you'll understand in many ways is a pretty traumatised society in its own right. My first professional role was in statutory child protection in Belfast, which was a pretty interesting place to work and certainly was a baptism of fire into social work. So in 2003, I took a career break. Now, in hindsight, this was my first attempt to distance myself, I think, from the trauma and the impact of my social work role. But at that time, and for a long time afterwards, I called it a career break. And on that career break, I fell in love with Sydney in my travels and I settled here. And since being in Australia, I've been working with youth at risk and homelessness. And I've later returned to the family support child protection arena as a manager of a non-government organisation. So it was in 2015 that I experienced my breaking point. It was not sudden. It had been emerging for a long time, but I was unable and felt unaware about how to prevent it. To be honest, I didn't know what it was at the time I was experiencing it. Ironically, it wasn't a major crisis or a client trauma that tipped me over the edge, but it was a comment about a stale biscuit. I remember it vividly. I left the meeting, I walked upstairs to my manager's office and I told her I was broken. Within 48 hours, I was a crumbled mess in a psychiatrist's office. Now, after a few weeks off, I decided that I was better, and in my eyes, I was ready, and I returned to work for a very small meeting. But this immediately re-triggered me, and I ended up having a massive panic attack and driving home, and eventually, after 3 days of severe abdominal pain, was taken to the emergency by a very scared and worried husband. I didn't listen to my mind. So my body literally gave me a kick in the guts until I took notice. So to cut a long story short, despite attempts at resuming work, regaining an insight into the love I have for my profession, I recognized that I could no longer continue. It was me, my well-being, or the work. So I chose my wellness, and I have not regretted that for one moment since. I'm here today to tell you that maintaining wellness in your work and even recovery if you've let things go a bit too far is possible. But more critically, I'm here to share with you the learnings from my experience, research, training, and the benefits of hindsight so you don't need to get to the point of burnout. I want you to know that your well-being matters and it needs you to prioritize it now. Otherwise, you will be no good to anyone in the future. My vision is to empower social workers with the awareness, skills, and insights to continue to practice sustainably by putting your needs at the forefront of care. It is possible, and it starts today with each of you here. The ripple effect will flow outwards for the good of all of us. Okay, so you've tuned in today for a reason, and that means that you deserve to take a bit of time out to support you. So for the next hour or so, turn off your phone, or at least put it face down beside you so you aren't tempted to mindlessly scroll Facebook. Give yourself the time and headspace to listen to the information and take it in. You should all have downloaded your webinar workbook. If not, it's on the download link in the email reminder that came with you today, and it's below this webinar recording. Use the worksheet to make some notes. Reflect on your circumstances and think about how you might implement some of the learning when you are back in the thick of the work. And finally, as a thank you for joining me today, I have a free bonus for those of you who stay right to the end. So everyone loves a freebie, right? Well, I'm offering you free access to my Aromatic Breathworks intro program and free samples of essential oils. So stay listening until the end to hear how I use aromatic breathwork and essential oils in my wellness, and to understand how you can get access to these bonuses and even more to come. So let's start as we mean to go on. One thing I know for sure is that in life, your work should not make you ill. But in my case, and in many other people's cases, it did just that. I want to be real and honest about the impact of our work as social workers on our well-being. But I'm very aware of the importance of not adding to the trauma you see and hear about every day. So I will endeavour to give examples, but not explicit details about my experiences. And I ask that in sharing, you do bear this in mind. This presentation today is about awareness and education. It is not a therapy session. However, for some of you, it may trigger some issues or self-realizations about your situation and needs. If that is the case, please take notice of these feelings and take responsibility for your well-being. You need to seek out specialist support and work through what it is where you are at. Now look, the good news is that burnout is not inevitable and that recovery is possible. There is an inevitability about the toll our work will take, but it does not need to do harm to our well-being. There are tools, techniques, and therapeutic supports available to ensure your ongoing wellness and your professional sustainability, if you're willing to access them. I believe it is important that we change the rhetoric about a social worker's lot. Yes, dark humour helps us get through a lot. But for as long as we as a profession assume and accept that overwork and extreme stress is part of our professional lot, then we are letting the employers and the structural system off the hook. So look, please know that you are not alone in the pressure, overwhelm, and distress of your work and the conditions that it causes. There is a powerful movement of professionals out there seeking to raise the awareness and the importance of workplace well-being. And this is just the start. Okay, so for tonight's content, let's just go over what we're going to cover in this webinar. And let me know which one resonates with you most and tell me about your experiences. Make sure you jump in with comments. Obviously, in the recording, you won't be able to do that, but feel free to let me know what it is that has made you, sparked your interest and given you the reason to jump on this webinar today. So together, we're going to look at the effects of your work on you. We will explore compassion, satisfaction, vicarious trauma, and moral distress, and we'll go on to look at burnout and recovery. And throughout, we will look at ideas for support and prevention. So remember to stay to the end and learn more about the free bonuses and how to get the support you need to do the work you love regularly and safely. Whatever section of social work you are in, there is no disputing that it's a highly rewarding yet demanding role. We all get something from caring and helping others, that sense of compassion, satisfaction. Sepio acknowledged that acts of kindness, connection, and compassion activate pleasure centers in our brain, and that much of our professional fulfillment can come from acts of compassion. However, often it's not the caring that challenges us as much as the system we try to work within. Back in 2002, so a while back now, a review of social work stress and burnout identified that social workers face higher levels of stress and resulting burnout than other comparable professions. And this stress often comes from the role conflict between client advocacy and meeting agency needs. In 2017, Dr. Lorraine Harrison identified that 7 to 8 out of 10 community sector workers are stressed in their work and the situation is getting worse. So if we remember that social workers may face higher levels than comparable professions, what does that mean for us as social workers? It's also been reported that psychological injuries, the medical term for stress compensation claims here in Australia, were the highest in the health and community sector, representing 20.5% of WorkSafe claims in Australia back in 2013. It's not really boding well for us, is it? So you must remember that you also have a life outside of the social work role. Many of you might have seen something like this image before, the what people think we do. I like this one. But the reality, though, is that we are impacted by these external perceptions, by the fear and blame culture and the idealistic view that we can fix everything every day as social workers. Over 25 years ago, Kurland and Salmon wrote, stating that social workers face ever-increasing pressures as the problems they deal with reflect the societal changes and the increasing stress of everyday life. That was 25 years ago. That was before, we had like everyday access to mobile phones and work emails and beeps to remind us and apps for this and everything else. So societal stress is reflected in the stress that we as social workers face. Multiply that with all the bureaucratic pressures, media-fueled social worker failings in child tragedies, and the political whims of the current climate, and there is no doubting that social work is a tough gig. But here's the thing, we love it, and we want to do it, and we want to do it well. So we need to start looking at things differently. There are undeniable systemic failures that impact the work we do. Insufficient funding, unrealistic organisational expectations of the work, focus on throughput and KPIs rather than relational models we aspire to. But we have a choice to be the victims of the system or to empower ourselves to survive and thrive as social workers despite the inadequacies of the system. Look, guys, we're social workers. Empowering people to grow and change and thrive is what we do. It's time that we let ourselves have that opportunity. Okay, for a moment, I think it's important that we just take a look at trauma-informed practices and how it may have impacted ourselves as social workers. So many of you will be aware of the growing prevalence of ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a concept that grew out of the 1995 to 97 research study in the US, and it shed light on and provided statistical evidence of the impact of adverse childhood experiences. So the experience of single traumatic acts or chronic stressors in childhood on the lifelong physical and emotional well-being of the individuals. Now, whilst there is a lot of discussion about ACEs for the clients that we work with, it's also important to remember the growing impact of that this has on practitioners. So the study data identified that only 36% of the population, and this was a US study back in 95-97, did not have any adverse childhood experiences. That means that the rest had one or more, with over a fifth of the study participants having 3 or more. Now, as we know, adverse childhood experiences are correlated to adverse long-term outcomes. So whilst we're aware of this for our clients, we also need to be aware of this for ourselves as practitioners and the potential that we may have our own ACEs, our own adverse childhood experiences that may add to the triggering experiences we get from the secondary trauma that we're exposed to. Secondly, as we're more aware about the impact of childhood trauma and we're potentially screening for it more in our work, we're thus increasingly exposed as practitioners to more disclosure about trauma in our everyday work. And we are more aware of the long-term effects of these childhood experiences on our clients. So the more the practitioners feel it's understanding that the more we see, the more we know, the more we understand, the more we may actually be impacted by that information. As workers, as we become more trauma informed, we also become more exposed to trauma and more aware of the impact of the trauma on ourselves. This requires organisational contexts that are supportive of the impact of the trauma on the workforce. Bent Goodley identified that we need a sustained response that is not specific to the individual worker's needs, but recognises that the nature of trauma-informed work requires organisational responses. I'm a firm believer that vicarious trauma, burnout, the impact of our work on us is not an individual responsibility. It is actually a professional and organisational phenomenon. But until it becomes a reality that our workforces take the lead, I'm not prepared to risk your health in the meantime. So we need to develop our own individual capacities for sustainable caring. The ongoing capacity to be able to provide care for others with a compassionate mindset without exhaustion, depletion, and harm to ourselves. So are you ready? Okay. The role of a social worker, I guess, is very often misunderstood. It's acknowledged that social workers are at risk of stress and emotional distress, but it's also identified that other human services workers tend to underestimate the extent of distress faced by social workers. So some of the contributing factors to this distress relate to the basic nature of social work practice. The tension between philosophy, work demands, and the organisational and work environment. In recent decades, the role of social work has been transformed by administrative, social, and political changes, and the extent of the role conflict experienced by social workers. Social workers face increasing conflict between the role expected of them as employers and the professional values and expectations of self that we as professionals have. The concept of moral distress is emerging in the social work field, and we will talk more about this as we go on. We know that this is an experience we all share as social workers. Okay, we know that the challenges that we face in our job and in our profession are not unique to us as individuals. And we need to take comfort in this shared experience, but not become resigned to the negative effects that this can have on us as individuals. Sustainable caring can be learned by increasing the awareness of the impact of the work and developing and putting into practice everyday tools to protect ourselves within the work. My goal is to be able to consistently provide to enable you to be able to consistently provide compassionate care within our current system, but for you to gain a personal resilience to the pain and suffering of others and to your own moral distress. This is why today and my future trainings aim to support you to achieve that. So let's have a little bit of a look at what I have drawn out as the burnout continuum. We don't suddenly reach professional burnout. There are stages, indicators, signs and symptoms along the way. The question is, are we aware of them? And more poignantly, do we listen to them? For me, it was only well into my recovery that I came upon the teachings of Charlene Richards. She's a Canadian mental health social worker and compassion fatigue trainer. And it was really with regard to vicarious trauma. And even later when I found myself in the world of Andrew Jamerton and those that followed with the concept of moral distress. With these two theoretical concepts, I immediately saw my experiences and my journey suddenly had a name. I've already alluded to compassion satisfaction. Remember that feeling that we have of being able to make a difference, that what you do for a living really matters and that you're changing lives. Some of you might need to think hard, but memories of this and hopefully elements of it still remain in the work because that's what drives us. The impact of our work, however, the daily pressures, the trauma we are consistently exposed to, and the limitations on our practice do take their toll. Our commitment to helping people and the pressure of the role and the limited boundaries and protection of our own needs mean we begin to move away from compassion satisfaction. And this is when the early warning signs begin. Compassion satisfaction is what keeps us doing our job. It's the positive rewards we gain from carrying out our job with compassion. It's a pleasure we derive from being able to do our work, being able to act on our own moral agency and affect change. It is what we have when we believe the work we are doing is effective and making a positive difference, that we are effective. Killen said that the pleasure a helper can experience from helping others and feeling that they are making a positive difference in the world is what compassion satisfaction is. Take a moment to reflect on your work. Make a note of the compassion satisfaction you feel from your job. Just reflect on that and remember it. Okay, so here's the thing. We are not robots. The nature of our work means that we will likely spend a fair bit of time in that flux between compassion satisfaction and elements of compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, or moral distress. We'll talk more about these things now, but remember that this flux is an expected part of our work and that it's okay as long as we know and do the things to bring us back to compassion satisfaction and wellness. One thing I just want to take a moment to think about now is a strategy that can help us remain in compassion satisfaction, and that is gratitude. And it's the practice of gratitude, not just an attitude of gratitude. So we need to keep finding the good in each day. Research has shown us that the psychological benefits of positive psychological interventions, such as gratitude, are evident in what is what has been seen in the research. The proven effects of gratitude include increased positive effect and a reduction in depression, which was found by Seligman in 2005. And there's also been physiological benefits of gratitude, so improved biological functionings and reduction in blood pressure in the healthy population, which was found in 2016 by Jacquos and Co. So take a moment to think about gratitude and decide on one action you will take daily for the next week. Write it down in your worksheet and keep yourself accountable. It might just be that you make a list of things that you are grateful for, or recite things that you are grateful for. It might be that you take a brief moment of grateful contemplation and reflection, or it might be that you write a letter of gratitude or thanks. Whatever it is, think about trying to implement one into your day, and that will help keep you in that positive zone. Look, I'm a great example of changing from an attitude of gratitude to a practice of gratitude. Gratitude doesn't take away the pressures and the stresses of your work life, but it helps you to reframe your mindset so you see things from a much more positive and thankful lens. I run through at least 3 things I'm grateful for when I wake up, before I even get out of bed. I am not a morning person, and I can often wake up with a negative headspace. But I found that the ritual of reiterating and going through 3 at least things that I am grateful for is a great way of reminding myself of the goodness that's out there and starting my day on the right foot. So if you do nothing else, start putting in a little bit of gratitude into your day. Okay, so let's move on. Because as social workers, we're trained to utilize compassion and empathy in our work, we are vulnerable to emotional stressors and as a result, compassion fatigue. Personally, I believe that these symptoms come as much from moral distress as we experience as from a fatigue in compassion towards our clients. But regardless, let's be clear about the signs and symptoms we need to be aware of and check out how many of these you recognize in yourself at the moment. So look, as your work takes its toll, you may experience less, if any, compassion satisfaction and a lessening of hope and the passion that you once felt. If added to that, there are times that you see people as irritants, not individuals, and your emotional and physical energy is low. These are some of the key warning signs. You may begin to withdraw from family and friends and colleagues, simply not having the emotional capacity to interact or deal with wider things. Whilst in some cases there may be complaints or comments about you or your work, also a lot of professionals actually up their focus on work to try to compensate for the signs of compassion fatigue that they're feeling. Whilst working more may not be more effective, as even though we try to work more, we might find that it's not actually, we're no more effective than we were before, because the impact of compassion fatigue starts to take its toll on our capacity to give. Behavioural signs can also include absenteeism, nightmares, sleep disturbances, avoiding clients and compromised care of clients, and agitation and conflict with others. Physical signs can include disrupted sleep, appetite, under or overeating as a coping strategy, exhaustion, headaches and stomach aches, tension in the body, and increased agitation. Emotional signs might include changes and volatility in your moods, a sense of powerlessness, helplessness, depletion, anxiety, rage, fear, sadness, shutdown, and overwhelm. Not sounding great, eh? Spiritual signs, however, can be questioning the meaning of your life, a loss of your purpose, and a questioning or anger at your religious or your beliefs, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness. And on an interpersonal level, when we may become withdrawn, begin to mistrust and place strain on our own relationships. It can have an impact on our parenting, a loss of intimacy with a partner, and the projection of anger and blame. Cognitively, you may display more difficulty concentrating, be more preoccupied with trauma, increase negative self-talk, heighten your perfectionism, feel a decrease in your self-esteem, have intrusive thoughts, self-doubt, and even a minimization of risk. This no doubt plays out in your workplace with a decreased feeling of competence, dread of working with some clients, thoughts about leaving the field, less enjoyment in your career, and finding it increasingly hard to see the wins. So there are lots and lots of signs of compassion fatigue. As we say, we will ebb and flow from compassion satisfaction to compassion fatigue and back again. It's the nature of our work. But what we need to do is to get our basic self-care right so that we can support ourselves to be able to have the capacity to flux back into compassion satisfaction. So look, we all know about the basics of self-care, but the question is, when we start to feel under pressure, are we actually doing them? Often it's the basics that we forget first, and they're the easiest things for us to put back in place and change to give us the support that we need. So how are you faring on these basics at the moment? Are you sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night? Are you eating a nutritious breakfast and a hot, balanced meal each day? Are you doing some form of daily movement, something that gets your heart rate up and a sweat on? Are you managing your alcohol intake? I didn't say cutting it out. I just said managing your alcohol intake. We're social workers after all. Are you maintaining some form of social connection? Are you being proactive about your basic health needs, your teeth, your eyes, your ears? And are you actually proactively taking some time for yourself? Are you prioritizing time for yourself each week to do something that brings you joy? Now, look, if you haven't already done it, after this presentation, click into the How Vulnerable Are You to Stress questionnaire. It's Appendix 1 in your handout, and actually have a look and see how you are coping on some of those basic day-to-day elements that are in your control. All right, so I said that we would talk a bit more about vicarious trauma. So for many of us, it is actually not our clients that cause distress. We remain compassionate and empathetic to their needs, but we're not immune to the impacts of being an empathetic helper, of hearing, witnessing their trauma and walking alongside them as we support their recovery. So let's talk a little bit about vicarious trauma and how this is intertwined with burnout. So McCann and Perlman in 1990 explained vicarious traumatization as a process by which the therapist's inner experience is negatively transformed through empathetic engagement with the client's trauma material. One of the differences with vicarious trauma is the shifting of the social worker's schema. It's a shifting of our worldview. As the more and more we're exposed to traumatic information, our world perception becomes warped due to the repeated exposure to this materials. It involves, according to research back in 2013, cognitive shifts in the social worker's frame of reference, including disturbances in identity, spirituality, and worldview, as well as changes in self-perception, ego resources, and psychological needs. So vicarious trauma can have elements of post-traumatic stress disorder without meeting a diagnosis. You might experience intrusive thoughts, nightmares, distressed exposure to cues related to trauma that you've repeatedly heard about, and creep in to thoughts of avoidance or avoiding thoughts and memories. For me, the realization that vicarious traumatization was occurring in my professional and personal life was most stark when I was dining with three very close girlfriends and talking about work and the world. And one of them said, "Helen, that's not our world. We don't see the world the way you do." Harsh, eh? So my exposure to child and interfamilial abuse had so warped my own personal schema, especially since having my own kids, that my worldview was markedly different from theirs, even as teachers and medical practitioners. So I think that what we need to remember is that vicarious trauma is something that grows on us as practitioners. It's not about one traumatic event. It's not post-traumatic stress disorder from one traumatic thing that we experience. It's not actually about our own trauma. It is the impact of that continual exposure to other people's trauma that gradually changes our inner psyche. It changes the way we see the world. And in doing that, it changes how we respond. And unless we're aware of that, then we're not able to counteract it and bring ourselves back to that safety of compassion satisfaction. But it's not all gloom. There is a growing body of research into post-traumatic growth and something called vicarious resilience, which identifies that as practitioners, we can also gain a unique positive effect that transform us as workers through witnessing trauma survivors experience their resilience and their recovery process. So everybody will experience that exposure to trauma differently, but we do need to pay attention to our own perceptions and worldview. And if we notice that it is shifting, then we need to do things to bring ourselves back into that sense of compassion satisfaction. So another support strategy that I think is really important is developing and continuing to be really cognizant of that self-other perspective. When working with clients and hearing and witnessing their experiences of traumatic events, it's vital to maintain a sense of self as separate from the events that we're hearing. So I wonder, what do you do to maintain your grounding in your own reality during and after sessions with clients? Because sometimes, we're listening and you're experiencing and you're exposed to some pretty heavy stuff on a day-to-day basis. Two simple strategies that may be worth reflecting on are one which is called the balcony view. And I like the idea of this. It's when working with clients, at times you enable yourself to visualize a story as if you're looking down on your client and yourself from a balcony. So you remain connected to the session and involved in the session, but you actually just allow yourself to step back and just envisage a bit of a distance. So you're looking down from your reality into the session as if you're on a balcony watching what's happening. These moments of intentional other separation will help to support you to be grounded and stay connected to your sense of self. Also, another great way is to use visual cues to help you remain grounded in your own reality during sessions. So maybe if you're in your own environment, you can put an object in your line of sight that gives you comfort, or something as simple as a bright post-it note in your line of vision. And during the sessions, seek to connect with this cue as it enters your eyesight, and use it as a reminder to relax, to breathe, and to feel into yourself, so that you remind yourself of you as separate from the story that you're hearing. So again, just little techniques to work on as you're practicing to help keep yourself connected and prevent the ongoing impact of the exposure to the trauma material. So look, let's move on to moral distress. Now, this is a term that maybe people are less familiar with than obviously compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma and burnout. I came across moral distress because the idea of compassion fatigue, the phrase compassion fatigue troubled me a little bit. And when I was doing some early research into my work, I was challenged by the concept that we're not fatigued about our clients. Our compassion doesn't run out. And I agreed with that. And when I found the concept of moral distress, it made really great sense for me. So as social workers, the inability to enact practice that fits with our moral and ethical principles can cause us stress. The concept of moral distress was coined by Andrew Jamerton in 1984 in the field of nursing. And it outlines a concept that can be summed up as distress caused when a social worker is clear on the right thing to do, but is prevented from doing it. So this is very specific. Whilst the concepts of moral distress are not well evaluated in social work practice, it serves, I believe, as a very useful framework for us to explore the structural limitations that are placed on practice and the impact on the workers that these limitations have. And the fact that the limitations on practice come at the expense of our own moral agency and often at what we perceive as the best interests of the client. So moral distress is more of a one-off circumstance. So it's not like the cumulative impact of vicarious trauma. It's a one-off situation that may occur where we know or we judge that we know the right course of moral action. And often this is linked to the best interests of our clients. But we're faced with structural or organizational limitations that restrict the right action being taken. And that means that as workers, we're at risk of experiencing moral distress. So to experience moral distress, there needs to be two situations. The worker needs to be aware of their restricted moral agency. That means we need to know that doing the right thing is being impacted, is being prevented. And there also has to be a psychological and a physiological suffering that follows from that. So we need to actually experience some suffering because we can't do what we want to do. This suffering may be guilt, anxiety, remorse, anger, self-blame, but it's actually the combination of those two things which make the experience have an impact on us. As professionals, what constitutes moral distress from one worker to another may differ greatly, but it's the fact that we're aware of restrictions on our actions and that we experience that sense of distress ourselves that means that it is, a distressing experience. So look, moral distress differs from moral dilemmas and ethical questions and situations which we often face in social worker. And moral dilemmas where, we're working through what is the best course of action between two, possible courses of action. They're things that we do all the time. But moral distress is much more impactful for the individual because it's a combination of both having thought through a moral situation and being clear that you know what the right course of action is and then being prevented from doing that. So look, the continual exposure to the consequences of our inaction may add to what is termed moral residue or moral injury. So the moral distress comes from that one-off situation, and we're aware that we can't do what we believe is right, and we actually suffer an emotional response as a result of that. Moral residue is the cumulative effects of that unresolved moral distress. So moral residue, Oliver in 2015 described it as that which each of us carries with us from those times in our lives when in the face of moral distress, we have seriously compromised ourselves or allowed ourselves to be compromised. Moral distress can result in strong feelings of guilt, frustration, and anger, which eat away at the worker, impacting their sense of self and professional efficacy. So every time we experience moral distress and every time we go through a situation where we know the right course of action and we're prevented from doing it, and we suffer and we see an ongoing consequence for our clients, then that starts to build up. And so moral residue is more akin to vicarious trauma. It's that accumulation of the impact of moral distress. So we actually have two elements here. We have what could be a significant impact of one situation, moral distress, which could really contribute to future burnout and that accumulation of those situations. So reflect for a moment on your own professional career. Are there incidents when you knew the right action to be taken, but were constrained by the organisation, the resources, time constraints? How did that make you feel? I believe that the idea of having a framework around that, the concept of moral distress, is really useful for allowing social workers to talk through the impact of these organisational constraints on our moral agency. It's something that I think we haven't had a language for before, and I think it's really important that we start to look at not only the impact of the trauma from the clients, but the impact of the emotional distress that we experience from the constraints of the work that we do. Okay, let's go on to burnout. So the tipping point for burnout can come suddenly, but as we've seen and we've talked about, it is not without its warning signs. So you can be experiencing burnout symptoms and then reach breaking point. For me, if you remember, it was a meeting with the stale biscuits, but that wasn't, the cause of it. Burnout is a particularly serious feature of chronic stress. Maslow described it as a syndrome with dimensions of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced feelings of personal accomplishment. The World Health Organization in 2019 had described burnout as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. In my personal experience, I was done. That day, I felt that I physically broke. I could no longer keep on pushing past and ignoring all the warning signs. I literally had nothing left to give, or I was unable to give anymore. I found I could not take in anyone else's needs any longer. I couldn't listen to anything or anyone. Couldn't listen to the TV or the radio or even music. I felt deflated and completely ineffective. Everything I was felt like it crumbled that day. That was my burnout. The prolonged exposure to chronic emotional and interpersonal stresses on the job had taken its toll. It was not the impact of a one-off stressor, but severe and everyday chronic stress. I had internalized it, and in that process, I had completely lost myself. Now, as we say, whilst burnout is recognized by the World Health Organization, we may see changes in how it's understood, but it's not a DSM-5 diagnosis. It's not an illness. So as a result, the mental health implications are often diagnosed. It's often the mental health components that are diagnosed rather than burnout per se. And for some, it might be, anxiety. For me, it was major depressive disorder. I was diagnosed with as a result of situational experiences. I'd let my work take its toll. And it's at this point, I think, that, if not well before, we actually need to get really good professional and psychological help. So let's look at the road to burnout. If we recall the initial image of the burnout continuum, you'll remember that burnout is not sudden and that there will be times when you ebb and flow through the different elements of compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, experiences of moral distress. But the shift towards burnout is a slippery slope. Okay, so things may have continued to worsen. You now have got a sense of dread every day about going to work. You're beginning to simply go through the motions. You begin to have minimal insight or awareness of your own thoughts and feelings, but go into just a basic coping mode. A good day is simply getting through the 8 or 10, 12 hours at work. It's likely that things are becoming noticeable to others. Maybe you're more irritable, less connected to friends and family, and really struggling to have compassion and empathy for those around you, possibly including clients. There's an overwhelming sense of apathy and loss of hope. Really, why are you bothering? Physical health symptoms are likely to be escalating. Tension headaches, lack of or disrupted sleep. The moods tend to be darker for more often with less glimmers of positivity and hope. You're most likely exhibiting symptoms of depression, but hey, we're the last ones to go ask for help for ourselves. So you will probably be just numb to it and just keep on going because that's what you do. Any of this sounding scarily familiar? Look, I hope not for all of you, but no doubt there will be some of you listening that are in this phase currently. And just remember that there is hope. Recovery is possible. And if you're in this phase, then professional help is required now, either in the form of medical support or through intensive and supportive workplace supervision. For those of you who are not there yet, the aim is to be able to keep caring sustainably so our well-being isn't compromised. We need to know and be aware of these risks so we can be equipped to respond to them. So thanks for that, I hear you say. Great, now we know. But what helps us stay well? Well, look, for me, I think that awareness is key. And hopefully you've gained some good awareness into the theoretical aspects, but you also need a baseline of your own functioning. Self-assessment tools, although not an exact science, can give indicators of where you are at. Now, some of you may have already completed these, but if not, turn and check out the Professional Quality of Life Scale, which originated from the work of Charles Figley, and was originally a compassion fatigue self-test developed in 1995. Now, the current ProQual version 5 was developed by STAM in 2005 and is now managed for the Centre for Victims of Torture. It's a free self-test that measures your levels of compassion satisfaction, compassion fatigue, and burnout. So this is in your handout. It's a simple 30 questions, work through, and you can self-score. The official ProQual website describes the importance of understanding your levels of compassion fatigue, compassion satisfaction, and burnout as follows. Professional quality of life is the quality one feels in relation to their work as a helper. Both the positive and negative aspects of your work influence your professional quality of life. Understanding the positive and negative aspects of helping those who experience trauma and suffering can improve your ability to help them and your ability to keep your own balance. So as I said, there's about 30 questions. You'll need to rate your response on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being never and 5 being very often. At the end, you use the scoring tool and you'll get a score for compassion satisfaction and a separate one for burnout and secondary traumatic stress or vicarious trauma. Remember, this is about awareness of your current levels and knowing where and how to take action. Okay, so the second assessment is based on vulnerability to stress. We all know about lifestyle self-care strategies. We've talked about them earlier on. And as we've talked about earlier, you just need to think about how many times you've been told that you need to get better sleep, eat better, get more exercise. But what are you actually doing? So these are not new things, but it is really important just to take a bit of a reality check and see where you're at. So if you haven't already, make sure after this webinar you take a moment to rate yourself on the how vulnerable you are you to stress scale, also created from the Figley Institute. And this is a prompt about the basic self-care elements that you have immediate control over now. These are things that you can change without, completely turning your world upside down. So when you've rated yourself, look realistically at these elements. I'm sure that there are some areas you can work on. So be realistic and start by changing just one thing this week. But we all know that if you try to overhaul your whole lifestyle in one go, it simply won't be sustainable. My approach is about awareness and gradual integration of strategies into your life and professional practices, so you can sustain them and yourself for the longer term. Great, Helen, that's all well and good, but we still have to go out there and deal with the everyday. So what is it that you can do when you're in the mix of the work yourself? How can you begin to take action to protect yourself and restore your well-being as you continue to practice? For me, the single most beneficial practice that I've utilized and continue to use daily is aromatic breathwork. I hear you say, and what the heck's that? Many of you, I don't know, how many of you have actually heard of essential oils? Well, high-quality therapeutic essential oils can have a significant support in regulating your emotions and helping you regain some control over your emotional well-being. Different oils have different effects, such as grounding and calming for stress and anxiety, or uplifting for times when you need a mood boost. When I was returning to work, I used small bottles of essential oils as a practical tool to support my emotional well-being. I would have them in the car and pull over and inhale the aroma when I was feeling the overwhelm. I'd have them in meetings, so I constantly was empowered to have tools to support me at times of stress and pressure. Combining the aroma of essential oils with structured breathwork is a powerful tool and accessible to everyone wherever you are. If you don't have access to good essential oils yet, the simple breathwork techniques on their own are also very effective. Being present and mindful of your circumstances helps to trigger that self-other awareness, a key cognitive protective skill that we've already talked about. A focus on your surroundings assists you to separate your reality from that of your clients or the situations you've been exposed to. Now look, I haven't got time in this webinar to go into further detail about aromatic breathwork and essential oils, but trust me that they are amazingly powerful. Now remember, stick around because access to my aromatic breathwork module and free essential oil samples is one of the bonuses that are to come. Okay, so let me ask you a question. How are you going with all the information that we've shared today? Do you have a clearer insight into how your work can impact your well-being? How would you feel if there was even more support to help you to understand, manage, and even prevent the impact of your work on your well-being? Would be pretty good, hey? So would you like me to share more about my program and how it can support you? Yeah? Great. So all of you who are keen to regain some control and be more empowered, let's learn a little bit more now. So you are not expected to do this alone. Let's get this straight. Social work needs a community of support, and so do you. So my course is an opportunity for you to invest in your professional awareness and sustainability and enhance your well-being. Because You Care, SOS, which stands for Save Our Social Workers, was designed to support social workers like you, to support you to reflect, learn about, and implement self-care strategies that will enable you to protect your well-being whilst you continue to do the work you love. I'm a social worker, I get it. We get amazing reward from our work, but there is a cost if we don't look after ourselves. So I've designed an online training platform where you'll get fortnightly access to each of the 4 modules, which contain smaller, easy to access lessons and support material. Each week, there's a live Q&A session, which will be held to answer questions and reflect and discuss the work together. There's a private Facebook group that will create a safe community of like-minded social workers, all keen to learn and put themselves first. So let me tell you a bit more about what it involves. You'll get access to the Helen Gray training platform where your course materials will be housed. This will enable you to get online access 24/7 from your computer or mobile. Support materials can be easily downloaded and training material is recorded for ease of watching and review at the time and place that works for you. This pilot course commences on the 12th of August and the first of the 4 modules will be released on that day. And that's called Setting Your Moral Compass. And this will take you through a detailed look at what sustainable caring in social work is, a bit more about vicarious trauma, moral distress and burnout, and looking at how they relate specifically to you. I'll introduce my Nurtured Practice framework and you'll explore your values, beliefs, rewards and ethical principles to clarify your expectations and your personal acceptability statement. We'll explore self-compassion and gratitude, and we'll begin to work on your daily practices and what works to support your well-being. Now, every fortnight, a new module will be released. So module 2 will be released covering mindset and culture. So in this module, we'll explore about mindset perceptions and systemic and workplace culture. And we'll dig deeper into the concepts of self-esteem, self-worth, and compassion. We'll explore boundaries, responsibilities, negative thought patterns, and perfectionism. And we will look at the stresses and triggers in your organizational context that'll help you gain clarity about your areas of control and the networks that you have available for you. Module 3, the mind-body connection, is released on the 9th of September, and we'll explore chronic stress and the impacts for well-being. We will dig much further into the awareness of self and emotional regulation strategies, and look at desensitization and denial as coping strategies, Significant emphasis in this module will be placed on practical strategies and skills to enhance emotional awareness and regulation practices. Flexi self-care and daily value-based practices will be added to your routine. This is an amazing module. And the final module, released on the 23rd of September, will draw all the learnings together as we explore what professional sustainability means for you. You'll assess personal risk and emotional and psychological needs and become clear on professional interventions and support available and that you require. You'll set your intentions for your professional future and realistically assess your current role. You will complete your plan for professional sustainability and ongoing evaluation of your needs so that you are ready to keep caring sustainably. So how does that sound? There's a lot in there. Any questions so far? Okay. All participants will become part of a closed Facebook group where we can connect, share our stories, and learn and grow through mutual support and empathy. This is a great space to check in with your fellow course participants, and I will be jumping in with ideas and to interact regularly. We know the importance of connection with people who are walking the same journey as you, who understand your experiences, is vital. And this is a really powerful part of this program. We'll also, as I mentioned, have weekly live Q&A sessions, and they'll enable us to connect semi-in person and to work through some of the key questions and issues. I'll also gain feedback and input from you as to what is working and supporting you most, and what else you feel you need as you work through and implement the practical strategies in your daily life. So why e-learning? Why not a face-to-face workshop? Hopefully through this presentation you've gained a better insight into the impact of your work on you and the potential for that to have long-term detrimental effects if you fail to develop sustainable caring strategies. I'm very clear that the effects of our work are expected consequences, not personal deficiencies. But it does still come down to you to act. As with all of our professional development, we need to continually invest in our own reflection, learning, and practices to keep growing. And in this case, just to simply keep going. Research is showing that there is a lack of e-learning support for burnout prevention. I also get that social work is a vocation, and I get what you do. I am a social worker too. You need a program that's created specially for social workers by a social worker, not a generic workplace wellbeing program. And yes, I also get that you don't have time to go on professional development workshops during the day, but you're committed to your work and to your wellness. So the online format means you can take your learning with you. Yes, you can do it in work. If you get the time and space, then go for it. But it will also fit in with your lifestyle, not make you fit into the program. Okay, so I'm going to voice the elephant in the room that some of you might already be thinking about. Why should I pay for this? Why should I opt into this program? I know, I agree. This type of support should be a core and integral part of a social work organisation's health and safety responsibility to all social workers. But for many of you, your employers can't even reduce your workload to a vaguely realistic amount. So you could be waiting a long time before they are willing to be this proactive. And that's where I come in. This is my passion. You as practicing social workers are my passion. I am not about providing agencies with another tick box to evidence that they're putting your needs first. I'm about supporting you to actually develop the key skills and tools to protect yourself as you continue to do the work you love. I'm launching a pilot program of my Because You Care program, which will offer you a supported environment to delve a lot deeper into the theory, practices, and skills you need to develop and integrate sustainable caring strategies into your practice. Through an online course with interactive components and a safe place to share, learn, and support each other, it's time for you to get the support and care that you need. And just so you know, I am not letting organisations off the hook. If you value the training once you've started and want me to approach your employer to fund and offer this to their other social work employees, I will do just that. And I'll reimburse you your training fee if your organisation takes it up. Not bad. Okay, so what are you going to get? So the program includes 4 awesome learning modules, as we've gone through, with individual bite-sized lessons valued at $399. You also get the 8 live Q&A sessions where you get direct access to me to get your questions answered and discussions going. And this is valued at $299. The support materials and activities and strategies for implementation are all available for download. And the invaluable private Facebook community where you get peer support and connection and my regular input. So as you can see, there is a lot of value here already. A total value, $896. But that's not all I'd like to include for you today. With this pilot, you can also get an action bonus. So this is what I alluded to at the start of the program. The aromatic breathwork module is a basic program which I've promised you will get as a bonus. If you are one of the initial 20 participants in this pilot program, then you get free access to this awesome bonus. It includes a module on aromatic breathwork, which includes an introduction to using essential oils and essential oils for your emotional well-being. You get a sample of 3 key essential oils to use in your practice, and an introduction to breathwork and a live demonstration video you can use to begin your aromatic breathwork practice. This is, as I said, essential oils and breathwork are one of the key aspects of my ongoing well-being. And I am so excited to be able to share this with you as a bonus from this program. But that's not all. I have another bonus. The basic program is great, but if you're one of the 20 participants, you will also get access to this awesome bonus. You will get 3 online peer consultation sessions where we collectively join together as a group and consult on how we are experiencing and implementing the program strategies and concepts of your work. This is going to be an amazing opportunity. It's not case supervision, but peer support with like-minded professionals. One of the things that I know from talking to social workers and my research is that sense of isolation is often critical for social workers. This is an amazing opportunity to get online peer consultation and support from a group of like-minded people. And 3 online peer consultation sessions will be spread out at the start, during, and after the program finishes. And as if that is not enough, if you're one of the initial 20 participants to this program, you will also get lifetime access to the program materials. As I've mentioned, this is a pilot, and if you're a part of my pilot crew, then you will be pivotal in shaping the future of this course for other participants. So as the pioneers, as the early adopters, you will also get lifetime access to the program materials and all the revisions that I make from your feedback and future versions of the program. For supporting me and other social workers, you get lifetime support for yourself. So, let's recap what you're going to get. The program includes 4 awesome learning modules with individual bite-sized lessons, 8 live Q&A sessions, the support materials and activities, the private Facebook community, and then your action bonus of the aromatic breathwork and essential oils, the 3 peer consultation sessions, and lifetime access to all the course materials. This is a total value of over $1,500. But the actual cost of the Because You Care SOS program is only $397. So you can see that it is an amazing saving. But wait, that's not all. Because you are right here with us now, I have an even better offer for you. For the first 20 participants, you can get the Because You Care Save in Our Social Workers program for $147. Whoa. This is a one-off price and it is available only to the first 20 participants for this pilot round of the Because You Care programme. After that, it will revert back to the $397 full price. So look, invest in yourself and your career now and click on the link in your workbook and go and save your spot. Guys, you deserve it. I know that you are passionate about your work. You are passionate about making a difference. And I'm passionate about helping you to do that. I want you to really think about what your choices are. You've got two choices. You can keep on doing what you're doing and hope things change. Option one is what I did for a long time. I dug my head in the sand and ignored what was going on around me. But as I've said, you know where that got me. Or you can make a small financial outlay for a big investment in your well-being and professional future. Invest in yourself. It's your chance to benefit and to be part of making sure this program is the best it can be for others that follow. So click the link in your workbook. Click on to members.helengray.com.au/because-you-care. Read a bit more about the program and sign up. As a reminder, the top first 20 will get that amazing pilot program price of $147. And finally, look, guys, if this presentation has triggered any critical needs for you, please seek professional support as soon as possible. Phone support can be gained in Australia through the Black Dog Institute and Lifeline. And as a first point of contact, your GP or your workplace EAP provider can direct you to more specialised support. Don't wait until it's too late. I lost my practicing social work profession, and I don't want you to become another victim to a broken system.